1991 was a great year to be a gamer. We saw Street Fighter II become a surprise success at the arcade, single-handedly birthing an entire genre of competitive fighting games. The Genesis introduced 16-bit gamers to Sonic the Hedgehog, ToeJam and Earl, and the entire cast of Streets of Rage. And most importantly, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System finally launched in North America, signaling the official start of one of the greatest system wars of all time. No matter what kind of games you were after, there was a system right for you. But, which console reigns supreme? In order to answer that burning question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly's 1992 Video Game Buyer's Guide, where Steve, Ed, and the rest of the review crew rated all of 1991's hottest consoles. Come join me as I parachute into the front lines of the system war and count down Electronic Gaming Monthly's top 10 video game systems of 1991.
If you were colorblind and had an IQ less than 12, then you wouldn't care which portable you had. Of course, you wouldn't care if you drank from the toilet either. Game Gear.
Only a year after Sega brought their first portable to the market, there were already signs that the Game Gear was doomed. Electronic Gaming Monthly wasn't exactly blown away by the little 8-bitter in 1990, giving it a middle-of-the-pack 5.5 out of 10, so it's a shame to see things fall apart so quickly. The main culprit was a dismal software lineup that included disappointing versions of Ninja Gaiden, G-Lock, and Revenge of Drancon, which turned out to just be Wonder Boy with a different name. Just about the only Game Gear title that EGM approved of was A Land of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse, though even that was a step down from the 16-bit Mickey. Yeah, this was truly a rough year for Game Gear adopters. When it came to Electronic Gaming Monthly, Steve was the first to start whacking at this particular piñata. The Game Gear is a step backwards for anyone who sampled 16-bitters. The machine has simple games, and the graphics just don't compare to the lower price of the Lynx. Martin agreed, noting that the only games that I gave any attention to were Ninja Gaiden and Shinobi. Other than those two, there just aren't enough games for me. Ed gave it a slightly higher score, but it was still just as doom and gloom. The Game Gear is in the same boat as the Master System. There just isn't enough software support. The Game Gear needs help, quick! With all eyes on the 16-bit race, it's easy to see why the Game Gear is EGM's lowest rated system with an average score of 3.5 out of 10. If you watched our 1990 episode, then you may remember that Electronic Gaming Monthly hated the Game Boy. They said that it was painful to play and only had a couple of good games, which ultimately led to it being the worst reviewed console of the year. Well, good news everybody! Nintendo's black and white portable is no longer at the very bottom. But don't take that to mean that they turned a new leaf on the Game Boy. Oh yeah, they still hate the handheld, this year even more than the last. Let's start with the good news. Martin gave the Game Boy a 5 out of 10 and starts his review by saying, "The good old black and white games never played better. Lots of cool games are the only thing saving this blurry, dark, overpriced portable." Sushi X, on the other hand, still hated the system, practically shouting at Nintendo to give me vibrant color and smooth sounds. Believe it or not, Steve had a theory. The Game Boy is suffering from the same problem that is plaguing the Nintendo. While it can play good games, the ratio between the winners and losers is just too low. Game Boy fans will be happy to see that it's not the lowest ranked system on the list, but with an average score of 4 out of 10, that's not saying much. With Sega and Nintendo locked in a battle for 16-bit supremacy, I think it's safe to say that the Master System, much like the Game Gear, was left to fend for itself. The good news is that EGM liked every single Master System game that they reviewed in 1991. The bad news? Well, they only reviewed 2 games, Ghouls and Ghosts and Land of Illusion. You have to understand, this is only a year before Sega officially discontinued the system in the United States, and based on the reviews, it's clear that the Master System was living on borrowed time. That said, the EGM reviews could have been a whole lot worse. After all, 3 of the 4 editors gave the system a middle-of-the-road 5 out of 10. Martin argued that there are only a few games that I really like for this system. Newer titles like Sonic and Ghouls are good, but with the Genesis prices so low, why settle for toned-down versions? SushiX agreed, asking a very similar question. Why settle for the chopped-up 8-bit versions of the snappiest, coolest, and best titles around? Ed gave the system the lowest score and practically begged Sega, if you're going to keep the Master System alive, then support it with games! With an average score of 4.75 out of 10, EGM was ready to say goodbye to this long-in-the-tooth 8-bitter. Much like the victim of a shotgun wedding, Electronic Gaming Monthly spent most of 1990 trying to make their marriage to handheld gaming work. However, now in 1991, I think it's fair to say that EGM wants a divorce. Without fail, we've seen every portable system lose ground in 1991, with all but one of them taking up space in the bottom half of the list. The Lynx especially had a mixed year. Well, it started the year with a number of duds like Robo Squash, Pac-Land, and Zarler Mercenary. The system did eventually rally with some heavy hitters, including Turbo Sub, Warbirds, and even a port of the Ninja Gaiden arcade game. Despite a string of great games towards the end of 1991, EGM was largely pessimistic about the system's chances. Martin notes the Lynx has shaped up a bit. There are more games on the way. The only problem is that most of the new games aren't any fun to play. Needs Japanese designers. Ed also had a demand, but it didn't have anything to do with Japan. The future looks great, but Atari is unpredictable. Needs a TV tuner to compete. Steve wasn't as concerned about watching Home Improvement on the go, concluding that Lynx has some nice looks, cool features, and finally more games, making it a much more viable unit. The original stuff isn't blue ribbon quality, but the conversions are. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back for the Lynx, which averages a score of 5.25 out of 10. If the Nintendo Entertainment System was supposed to be in its sunset years, nobody told Nintendo. It's easy to see why the editors of Electronic Gaming Monthly were miffed at the Game Gear and Master System when they only reviewed 6 games between them. But the NES was still home to a lot of great games in 1991. In fact, they had the most games. EGM managed to review 52 different NES games in 1991, which makes up a whopping 32% of the total reviews that year. It was the year that brought us Battletoads, Ninja Gaiden 3, Kabuki Quantum Fighter, and a couple of dozen other games with ninjas in them. So, with such a strong lineup, why is the NES so low on this list? Let's go ahead and turn to Ed to answer that question. The old workhorse is about ready to be put out to the pasture. With so many licensees abandoning it for the new 16-bit Super Nintendo, I give it one more year of good life. Across the way, you can almost hear SushiX coming to grips with his own mortality as he writes, "Slowly but surely, the old 8-bit king is being overtaken by the new 16-bit generation." And then there's Martin, who complained that the system is in critical condition. While there are a number of great titles available, most of the new carts just don't measure up. It was fun while it lasted. Look on the bright side, 6 years is a great life cycle for any console. And in reality, Nintendo didn't truly pull the plug until 1995, 4 years after these reviews were written. Even still, the 8-bit NES averaged a so-so 5.5 out of 10.
There's Dad over there.
Ooh, I just love all the new things K-Mart has here.
Oh, I can see that.
So that's the new Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
What about it?
They say it has 16-bit technology, whatever that means.
Oh, I see. What else do they say?
That it has 3D graphics and digital stereo sound, and that Super Mario World is included.
Okay, we'll get it for him. So, how long did he work on you?
About 2 weeks.
Here's a fun fact. 28 games were released for the Neo Geo AES console in 1991. Electronic Gaming Monthly reviewed 2 of them. Yeah, that's not even 10%. With so few reviews, one might wonder why they even bothered reviewing the console in the first place, since they apparently didn't put much time into it. Perhaps that's why a lot of the reviews from 1991 sound like reruns of reviews from 1990. Steve gave this system the highest score, but immediately highlighted the problem. The Neo Geo is a blast for anybody with a deep pocketbook. The games are arcade all the way, with hyper graphics veiled over common themes. Still, a nice piece of tech. Sushi X was not impressed. Too much money for not enough fun. I'd rather try to find a JAMA board for sale than shell out the big bucks for a machine that barks more than it bites. When it came to Martin, he used SNK slogan against them. Bigger, badder, more money. The games are looking good, with more emphasis on gameplay as well as graphics and sound. The price is still a bit scary for me. Yeah, as it was for most people, Martin. With games costing hundreds of dollars, this system was simply out of reach for most consumers, which is why the Neo Geo scored an average of 6 out of 10. If you want to know about the ripple effect felt when the Super Nintendo collided with the Genesis, then look no further than this fact. Only one system managed to improve their review scores between 1990 and 1991, with every other system losing ground. You certainly see that with the TurboGrafx-16, which dropped nearly a full point and was starting to look like a third wheel to the Sega and Nintendo one-on-one fight. Sure, there were a few bigger titles reviewed in 1991, such as Bonk's Revenge, Wanderers from Ys, and not one, but 2 Valis games. But sadly, it wasn't enough to draw our attention from the headline act. Giving it a 6 out of 10, Martin sums it up perfectly. Despite the lower price tag, Turbo still seems to lack the excitement that the competing systems have. Ed was the kindest to the TurboGrafx, giving it a 7. But he still concluded that the new low price is a good start, but we need to see more revolutionary software like Sherlock. Sushi X didn't specifically ask for more full-motion video games, but did make the argument that the Turbo CD was an important add-on. By far the only system that requires a CD-ROM player in order to even compete with the Genesis and Super Nintendo. The Turbo needs a shot in the arm to stay in the game. Thankfully, that shot in the arm was coming, but would it be too late? Well, I guess you're gonna have to find out next episode. But for now, EGM gave the TurboGrafx-16 an average score of 6.25 out of 10. In a cruel twist of fate, the TurboExpress was benefiting more from the avalanche of new games than the actual TurboGrafx-16. While the home console looked like it was an outsider in the 16-bit war, the TurboExpress, on the other hand, was the king of handhelds in 1991. It had the best games, it had the best technology, and it had the best accessories. If any portable system was going to warm EGM's cold, dead heart, the TurboExpress was the best bet. Steve does an excellent job of not only talking up the system, but also describing its biggest weakness. Without a doubt, the best portable, but only Neo Geo owners will have one. Seriously, the high cost is well worth it, with a crystal clear picture and a decent library of softs. SushiX also gave the system a 7 and complained about the high price tag, but he did have one prediction. The TurboGrafx cards belong on the small screen and could possibly replace the parent system. Ed agreed that it's easily the best of the portables and actually better than the Turbo itself. However, he concluded that it needs more games designed for the TurboExpress. Wait, exclusive TurboExpress games? How would that even work? No need to figure that out, because EGM gave this high-priced handheld a score of 6.75 out of 10, which is somehow good enough to be the number 3 system of 1991. That's kind of depressing. And now it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for. That's right, it's the official start of the 16-bit System Wars. While it's fun to remind ourselves just how much EGM hated handhelds, admit it, the Super Nintendo versus Genesis showdown is the real reason you're here. As you can see, the Super Nintendo ended up in second place, and in what is sure to be the most controversial score of the episode, it wasn't even close. The word I would use to describe the EGM critics is disappointed. It's not that they didn't like the machine, rather that they were disappointed by the first batch of games. What's interesting is how everybody was quick to point fingers. Ed blamed the console. Nintendo could have done a lot better in designing their new Super NES. Some games are great, but many are hampered with massive flickers and slowdowns. Calling it a slow machine with a great music chip, Martin praised the scaling and rotation effects that came with Mode 7. SushiX was by far the most disappointed, giving it a 7 and going as far as to make another dubious prediction. Unless the programmers of this 16-bit giant can solve the horrible problem of slowdown and flicker, this system will die early, with the Genesis taking all the glory. With an average score of 7.75 out of 10, the Super NES will just have to settle for second place in this episode. But let me remind you, the system war is far from over. It's okay, Nintendo fans, you can admit it. 1991 was an amazing year for the Sega Genesis. It was the year when everything just clicked. Everybody fell in love with Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage, Top Final Fight, Gyruss became the new shoot-'em-up king, and let's not forget about Batman, Shadow Dancer, ToeJam Earl, and of course Phantasy Star 3. 1991 was also the year when the Genesis solidified its place as the go-to console for sports simulators. This was a stacked year for a company that was just waiting to break into the mainstream. With the possible exception of that terrible Dick Tracy game, this was a near-perfect year for Sega. And more than anything else, it proved that Nintendo had to do a lot more than just release a new Super Mario sequel to compete. For the first time in this entire episode, the editors of EGM actually sound excited about a system. After being underwhelmed by the Super NES, Martin couldn't wait to gush over the Genesis. The best games, the most games, and the best deal for a 16-bit system. With loads of hot titles and the Mega CD due out next year, it's obvious Genesis is a Super Nintendo killer in 1992. SushiX echoed those thoughts, saying that it's certainly the leader of the pack and has a lot to gloat over. The Super NES can't compare yet to the high-powered titles Sega's pumping out left and right. Now, for as excited as Ed was about 1991, he actually seems even more enthusiastic about the future. Sega is going head-to-head with the Super NES and coming out ahead, even without all the new special features. If you think the Genesis is hot now, wait until next year. Like I said, the system war is far from over, and I have a hunch that the Super NES is going to score some big wins in the near future. But with an average score of 9 out of 10, 1991 was clearly the year of the Genesis.
Somewhere on planet Earth, a scientist creates the ultimate machine.
At last!
A machine that will give him the power to journey into the mega world. With thousands of colors, 16-bit graphic technology, and 10-channel mega stereo sound. the most advanced video game system in the universe.
Yes!
Mega Drive from Sega.
Hey, thanks for watching us talk about classic console reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we're going to be posting new episodes of EGM's best and worst consoles all throughout the summer and going into fall. We still have a whole lot of years and systems to get to, so make sure to check out our full playlist. Now, here's the question I have for you. What was your favorite console of 1991? Look, I get it. There are a lot of people out there that love the Super Nintendo. It's a great system. But listen, it's really hard to argue against what Sega did in 1991. It may actually be their single best year ever. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Monday with a new episode of Next Generation's 1-Star Reviews. We're nearing the end of that series, which means that it's almost time to talk about Die Hard Game Fan. You are not prepared. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.